sorry for the delay, folks. It's 6:36. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we are recording. Is that correct? Great. Can you folks in the back hear me, at least? Okay.
Hold on.
If we get stuck with sound, please feel free to, give a shout out if you guys can't hear us.
Do you want us to use the mic? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to point out on our agenda tonight, we have it organized a little bit differently than we typically would. If you've been to our meetings in the past, you'd know that we would have a 10-minute public comment at the very beginning of our meeting, and then a 10-minute public comment at the very end of our meeting. Tonight, because there are so many discussions that will be happening that directly affect our public in a way that hasn't really happened before like this, we've included 2 public comment sessions embedded underneath those agenda items. So you'll notice agenda item 5, which is our legislative update, and agenda item 6, which is regarding school reconfiguration. There's time set aside for us to discuss it as a board, and then have a 20-minute public comment specifically around each of those items. So there'll be 20 minutes for the public to speak during the legislative update, and then 20 minutes during the school reconfiguration. This is just to help us organize meetings so that we're not trying to blend 2 ideas in our open public comment section. And we'll see how this goes. I'm going to add, and I'll try to remind you also, during this public comment time, the hope is that we can hear comments from the public. It is not necessarily a question and answer period, unless someone on the board feels like it needs an answer right at that moment, right? And I'm going to ask if you have the same idea or repeated idea, rather than come up and restate the idea entirely, feel free to say, I totally agree with what Colin said, so that we can at least note that there is a large amount of public support for it, but without having to reiterate the ideas over and over again. We're hoping that sounds fair. And like I said, we're kind of trying this out, and if it works, maybe we'll continue this in the future.
We've received several proposals.
We'll talk about that when we get there. So the first item on the agenda is to review the board norms. They're included in your packet. For those of you who are new to our board, this is something that we do. We just kind of want to review it, take a minute to look it over. Do you have the agenda? Here. Actually,
sure.
I have it.
Here, there's an extra
There you
one.
go.
Do you want it?
Great. Here's our book for the evening. And item 3, appoint our new board member. Do I have a motion to appoint Rogan? Can you tell me your last name? Lechtaler, to replace Deb Linus on the board.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Let's move by Dick Dale. Seconded by Suzanne. All in favor of appointing Rogan Lechtaler to the board? Looks unanimous. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Passes. Welcome to the board. And we'll talk this afternoon, or after the meeting, about next steps. I would like a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda,
And a second by Lindsay.
and the hiring, as you all have received, is a part of the consent agenda. It's one person.
Any discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? No, passes. Item 6, legislative update. Thank you. Item 6.
5.
5. I have the timer next to it, I'm sorry. I'll have to move that for my next meeting. Would you be willing to kind of kick this off, Jim?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
There's a legislative update in the package. We also just passed around an update to the legislative update because things are happening relatively quickly. Most of the legislative update in the package is focused on education transformation legislation. But one thing that I wanted to note first is actually the last item in there, which is the yield bill. All board members have received several communications on this as to, to decide whether or not they're interested in providing their input to the legislature. For everybody's interest, the yield bill is currently, the way yield bill is currently in the legislature, working its way through it, includes, right at this point, $118 million of additional funds. This is, sort of at the governor's request to buy down what would have been a tax increase of about 6% this year, to buy it down to about 1%. Now, while we all like lower taxes, the concern associated with that is if you buy down the tax rate one year, the next year you start in the hole by that amount of money. So you're stuck with the potential for a very serious increase the following year. So if at this point our boards haven't taken a position on it, but some of us have concerns about using that large of an amount to reduce the tax rate this year and putting us in a bad position when we start next year's budget. So on to the education transformation legislation. As noted in some of the past legislative updates, this got kicked off at the beginning of 2025 with a variety of presentations, then a bill coming from the governor's office. And there were really three basic elements to that proposal in the bill. One was that that the intent was to improve the quality of education and the equity of educational opportunities. That was to be accomplished by the next two items, which were a change in the education funding formula that we use in the state of Vermont, and then the third was to make changes to the governance structure to allow for hopefully greater efficiency in the operation of schools. We're kind of hoping that, we're seeing the whole process go through as it's working in the House, the Senate, elsewhere. All those three items, quality of education, education funding, and governance, we kind of feel should be primary focus of this whole effort. Honestly, when things go through the legislative process, one sometimes questions whether all three of those items continue to be a focus of what's going on in Montpelier. But, we're sure that everybody's interested in improving the quality of education in the state of Vermont. On the education funding front, that for the entire legislature, that effort is really taking place in the House Ways and Means Committee. They have been taking that topic up for quite a while. They're working on it, and the intent at this point is to come out with a product that the House Ways and Means Committee can vote on by the end of this week. What they're looking at is the putting in place a foundation formula that would come up with one method for determining how much, as a baseline, each school district in the state of Vermont would get to educate their kids each year. It's, currently the system is each district decides what they need to spend through their budget, get it approved locally, and that all adds up to the amount of money they have to raise from taxes. This would be taking a sort of bottoms-up approach and replacing it one that is a much more top-down approach to determining how much is going to be spent. So that's in House Ways and Means. On the topic of governance, that has really been, the governor's original bill came up with a bold plan of 5 school districts across the whole state, a major change. Essentially, the governor's plan at this point is pretty much off the table because there have been 2 efforts going on, one in the House Education Committee, the other in the Senate Education Committee. The House Education Committee just approved their form of a bill to restructure the governance of education in Vermont. That they voted out on Friday, and And that bill is now with House Ways and Means. The Senate Education Bill is a bill that has been proposed. Some of you may have seen last night's session at Burr and Burton. That's a proposal that's, that was presented by our local Senator Seth Bongartz, and that has a slightly different structure than the House bill. I did want to take a minute to mention it. Last night's, for people who were at last night's session at BBA, there was a point raised about statewide organizations and their approach to being counter to what we're looking to accomplish on a local level. Two of those organizations are the Vermont Superintendents Association and the Vermont School Boards Association. They are very influential organizations, and they're kind of presented in somewhat of an unflattering light last night. The Superintendents Association, Randy is a part of that organization. The Vermont School Boards Association, the Bennington area, the Bennington County area reps on the VSBA board are myself and Melanie. So, we've taken a view that these organizations, they generally, the direction they're going is very, very consistent with the interests of our district. Sometimes that doesn't happen. And we advocate on behalf of our local organization, our local educational system, but we can't always win that argument. Basically, they're just, there are competing interests at that level. And so we do our best to advocate for ourselves, but honestly, what we find by being a part of those organizations is, we have an opportunity to influence their direction. Where we can't influence their direction, then we have a pretty clear indication of where we have to fend for ourselves and advocate on our own behalf. And that's worked out pretty well for us today. So the House bill has been in process for months. The bill attempts to do a lot of things. It's based upon a lot of testimony that's been taken. It's very heavily actually influenced by testimony from the Vermont Superintendents Association. We have been tracking that bill for quite a while. If you saw last month's legislative report, it noted that there were certain fatal flaws with that bill. We specified what those were. Essentially, the concern was the House bill, as a way of handling what governance will look like in the future, the House bill sets up a new subcommittee of the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont, which was set up last year. Sets up a subcommittee to use expert opinion, research, et cetera, to come up with ideas of how the new school districts, where the line should be drawn, what makes sense. Our real concern was that subcommittee, the biggest concern was that subcommittee, one of the first criteria for the new districts they draw, because their idea is they're supposed to come up with up to 3 proposals to present to the whole legislature on what school districts could look like. One of the first criteria that they had that was, a serious fatal flaw from our perspective was that each district they drew had to operate all grades from K to 12, or pre-K to 12. We knew that would not work with our structure. That was a fatal flaw. We're lucky to have some very good legislators who listen to us. And one of those legislators, Rob Hunter, is actually on the House Education Committee. So on last Thursday night, the bill still had that fatal flaw language in it. Rob worked on our behalf, and by Friday, when they voted on the bill and passed it out of committee, it no longer had that language. Now that language was changed to each school district would have to provide for the education of all of their kids, K to 12.
Can you expand a little bit more on that, just for everyone to understand the importance of that for our community?
Sure. Basically, if you look at the Taconic and Green system operates grades, operates through 8th grade. We do not operate grades 9 to 12. And we rely upon our partners in, independent schools and, and wherever people want to go. We have school choice for 9 to 12. We also have an element of 7-8 choice in our system. But if that language had not been changed, then when they drew lines, they could not, when they drew lines, they would have had to draw us in a way so that all of our kids could be assigned to a public high school.
That's not the case.
That is now not the case. So, the way we had, concerns that they could even try to break us up town by town to send us to public high schools elsewhere, who knows? But with the change to our providing for education of kids K to 12, we can do that in different ways. And one of the other major changes to that bill that was made on Friday was a point that hadn't been there before, which was that subcommittee, when they make up the districts, they're required to take into consideration, to the extent possible, the historic structure of providing education to kids. So they actually have to consider the fact that we do not operate 9 to 12. And they have to consider how we now provide education, and that has to be a part of that subcommittee's work on determining what our district should look like.
Historic school attendance patterns.
Right, thank you. So that, there's actually an article in the Manchester Journal that just came out this afternoon. It talks about last night's meeting, and it makes some of these points. I think, that is, we owe a big debt of gratitude to our legislators for working for us on this, because, as I said before, there are groups like VSBA and VSA. We usually hope that they will advocate on our behalf. They weren't going to on this issue, but we were able to, through, work and through having legislators who want to do their jobs right, they came through for us. The Senate bill. The Senate bill. So that's the House bill that was passed on Friday. It's now in House Ways and Means, where they're also working on the funding formula. The Senate bill was presented last night. Senate bill is really focused on, largely on one specific school district reconfiguration or map. That map, we know all of our communities support providing education the way we do currently, and that map is designed to retain school choice the way we have by keeping in certain areas a supervisory union structure instead of a supervisory district structure, and essentially coming up with new districts that are based upon the school choice options in different areas. One difficult thing from our perspective is, currently we have the Bennington-Rutland Supervisory Union that serves 2,200 kids over a big area of about 460 square miles, which is done ably by our superintendent. If we went with the Senate structure at this point, that would go from 2,200 students to an organization of about 7,600 students, and over an area that's roughly 3 times as large. So it would be, that new district would be operating schools from Pownell up through Chittenden. So it's a pretty big area. So we have, that that raises some issues as to, it would be tough to do, to manage that. Think about, we have to provide special ed services at every school in the entire district. That's a lot of schools over a lot of territory to manage, and overseeing day-to-day operations. So honestly, if things were to go in the direction of the Senate bill, then, with all of these bills, it's not over until it's over. All of these bills, whatever gets traction, could potentially be adjusted down the road. But some of the issues with the Senate bill. Another issue that we have in general is that, we've been, as a district, we've been talking a lot. We've had, our board meetings, we've had sub-meetings as well. We have board leadership from across the SU getting together on a regular basis just to discuss legislation and trying to figure out what is important to us. And going back to those original comments about quality of education and, impacting that through the funding formula and governance, all of those elements have been, we've identified as important to us. We feel that, generally our districts have been pretty fiscally prudent, and we've honestly taken a forward-looking approach to how we provide education through all of the visioning and, we've done on, those tough discussions on whether or not we should restructure our own system. Taconic and Green now operating 5 schools, for the number of kids. We're taking a look at whether that makes sense, and we think we're spending our money pretty carefully. Our concern as a school board is that not every school board in the state takes their responsibility quite in the same way. We have had what we view as very responsible budgets that have been way below the increase in education spending on a statewide basis for the past several years. Last year, there was an uproar because of the increase in property tax rates. The increase in property tax rates reflected education spending increasing at a high level for the state as a whole. Our spending was much more, was far lower than on a statewide basis. So we have, as a school board and as communities, I think we have a great interest in, the way our funding system is now structured. If we're prudent, but the rest of the state isn't, we still pay for it. We as a board feel that it's important that school boards around the state essentially have their feet held to the fire a little bit more. That they are given some direction on how they should operate in a way to be more efficient and to hopefully improve the quality education of their kids at the same time. Some of those, sort of proposals, which actually in the House bill right now, there are provisions as to minimum class sizes. We view that as an important element. We've also talked about minimum school sizes as a potential way to incentivize school districts to figure out how they can operate on a more efficient basis and keep spending under control. We viewed that, some of those changes, some type of direction from the state level to school districts all over the state to how they should operate and criteria they should meet in order to, to actually force them to be more efficient is important. At this point, the House bill has some of that in it. At this point, the Senate bill doesn't include that. And so that's, something we'd like to see in whatever is the final outcome. Just quickly, the process in Montpelier is a confusing process to me, certainly. I'm sure most of the rest of you as well. There is a House bill that'll probably, through Ways and Means, they'll have a funding element added to it by the House Ways and Means Committee. It'll come to vote come to vote by the whole House, and will become one element of one option. The Senate bill will likely go through the Senate. Our understanding from Senator Bongartz and all is that probably the funding formula stuff that's done by House Ways and Means will probably become a part of that as well. So then, what happens is you've got two competing bills. Those will likely go to, I guess they call it a conference committee, where that'll go and they'll try to duke it out and figure out, what the overall bill should look like. So this is, we've got bills passing committee and stuff like that, but we're still not anywhere near the end game of this education legislation. We've got a lot of work yet to do. I'm sorry for talking so long, but hopefully that provides, enough of a base to where things stand.
I guess now, if there's thoughts or concerns regarding that specifically, we also want to talk about the federal action and potential local impacts of that. And I don't want to conflate the two issues.
No, that's a separate. That's
Right.
separate, so.
We have an item on the agenda that I requested be on there for an action item for legislative action and/or advocacy. I don't necessarily intend to make a motion in that regard. However, I do feel like because we haven't talked about this really as a full board yet, because it's coming so quickly, it might be worth us deciding and really thinking about as a board, how do we want to be involved in this process? And if we want to be involved in this process, and if we do, how, let's make very clear what either our intentions are, our concerns are, and how we want to approach it. So that is why the action item was there, and I kind of look to you as the rest of the board to have a discussion about this. Like I said, I know Randy's been talked to, Jim's been talked to, I've been talked to, but our whole board has not convened until tonight to really discuss this. Did you have your hand up, John?
Yeah, it didn't go. Go ahead, Dick.
I think it's also important that we have regularly met with legislators way before August of last year, and that they have listened to us, and they've also listened to Randy, who's developed incredible credibility with all of the legislators with respect to the way we operate. One of our items of considerable importance is the first part of our policy issue. And the policy issue is stated in the ends policies and the vision of where we want the schools to be in terms of especially developing programs that speak to and educate in an equality way all of our students in the most appropriate way, satisfying the educational needs, social needs, and any other needs of our students. We really do care about our students, and the whole policy framework is designed to articulate community-based policies that directly impact and affect our students. We have periodically, in my time on the board, weighed in on particular issues. And I think that this is the window of opportunity to reinforce the fact that we had a voluntary Article 6 in one of our ballot votes that caused the citizens to overwhelmingly pass the idea that the voters thought that our system was operating pretty well, and we also know that they appreciated the growth and the honesty of the administration and the transparency of everything, and didn't really support any kind of change. We have that in our hip pocket. So this is the window of opportunity from my perspective, because still things are in flux. We as a community and as a board have credibility. We can make statements that try and seek win-win situations. We don't go after the legislatures by saying, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. We go after them saying, here's our goal, here's the best thing we can do for all of our kids. Let's win this together. So I strongly support the idea of a motion to get a letter framed with respect to where we are coming from and the details of both programs, the Senate's and the House, that defines what we're about, because I think we're about the right way to educate kids. John?
Yeah, thanks, Dick. Looking at the Senate bill and the House bill in comparison with each other, the House bill, I think, a lot of thought was put into it. What James said is that one problem is we don't know what the map looks like. In the Senate bill, my problem personally is with the map. It's nice to know what they would look like, but so essentially you have 9 SUs, supervisory unions. 6 of those are single district. Those are parts of the state that have no school choice. 3 of those SUs, which we are, one of those, would have multiple districts. The way essentially, back in Act 46, the way we kind of found our dance partners about who we wanted to merge with was based on our operating structure and what choice we provided. Whether you all have to have the same, operate the same grade levels in each school. One real problem I see with the Senate bill is that you got 5 districts. We're going back in time and how we're managing things. You got 5 districts in this new supervisory union. Sounds like a management nightmare. For a superintendent to negotiate 6 boards. You have 5 district boards, you got SU board, you got 6 budgets, you've got negotiating contracts, all that, how do you do curriculum when you're doing all these districts with different grade level, operating different grade levels? That's a real, for me right there, personally, and I'm willing to keep an open mind, that in itself is a non-starter for me to support that. To think that the future leader, I don't know, Randy would want to sign up for that job. That sounds like pretty challenging to take on a huge geographic region with multiple districts operating at different levels. Some of these districts don't even have any, have never worked together before. And so, is there space for Seth or Senate leadership, if we can get that down to 2 or 3 districts within an SU, I feel much more comfortable with that, right? If you can get down to offering, having a 9 through 12 choice district, maybe a 7 through 12 choice district and a fully operating choice district. That's something, still, Randy knows better than me, of course, that still sounds like a challenge to provide leadership for such a large district. But that's where I see space. If we can see a map, if we can marry some of the good things about the House bill with a map that we can see and that doesn't put us backward in time, that doesn't, I'm sorry I'm going on for so long. I find it hard to believe that we can achieve economy of scale with such a complex system. As soon as you add complexity to any system, right, it's harder to manage, harder to reach efficiency, and I worry that we'll have diseconomy of scale, and it will actually have rising costs if we have too complex a system. And the Senate bill, for me, is far too complex of a system.
Randy, did you want to say something?
I did. I think this is a really important conversation. I am very much on top of the work that's happening. I want the board to really know that. We do meet regularly with local legislators in our office. We meet regionally with superintendents and senators, representatives throughout the entire Southwest region. I've testified, I've made proposals. I think that the tension right now for us is if school reform, right? Reform is about change, and it is about improving opportunities for our students. It's about advancing the educational system in Vermont. This is public education, right? We have a very interesting way that our community has chosen to provide public education to the kids in the community. And I think that it is really important for us to be considering all of our students, expanding opportunities, ensuring opportunities, and advocating for continued choice within that model. And that is complicated, right? The comments I've been making to folks are, we are building for the future, so let's not rely on the constructs of the past to limit our ability to conceptualize the future. I think that's part of what has been somewhat challenging. And I think I want you as a board to know that that's the advocacy I've been doing, making proposals. When I hit a wall, continuing to problem solving with people around this table, problem solving with other folks, with other superintendents, with legislators. Last week I met with Secretary Saunders. We had, spent an hour and a half with House Ed members, Senate Ed members, House Ways and Means, Senate Finance, talking about things, listening to them, discussing concerns. They were asking us questions. It's definitely there's a lot going on. I will echo what John said. I have analyzed the map for the Southwest region. I've spent a tremendous amount of time with it. I've considered what it means to be operating a system like what is proposed, and I can agree that if there's somebody who has experience with it, it's me, right? We've got 4 boards right now. We came from having 12. We've got 4 boards. I understand in my head how to determine who works for which business, because we have different essentially hiring organizations within our supervisory union. A perfect example is the hire you got today. This is somebody who's been with us for a super long time. She worked for Taconic and Green, then she became a BRSU employee. Now she wants to go back to a TNG employee. She's not left a building in years, but we are having to hire her and rehire her because we have to make sure that we're following. That is just one tiny example that most people don't understand why, but that is the job of, the business office, the superintendent, human resources. The complexity of operating and running a business such as what is proposed, I can tell you, would be challenging. I feel very confident telling you that there would be many mistakes because it is very difficult for people to understand and execute accurately. And so, I had said, for whatever it's worth, I think a supervisory union structure is, John, your words, like going back in time, I think in general, that's how I think about the SU structure. Like, it's had a time and place, but as we're building for the future, we should be creating something that is stable, that is simpler. The last comment I'll make is that to operate that business will cost more. The number of, we are still, the supervisory union, the superintendent, the largest entity of operation, is still responsible for the education of all the kids within their unit, independent of where they go to school. So that means that we sit as the local educational agency representative when schools that we don't operate are providing programming and services to kids. To exponentially expand that will require, over the 1,500-mile footprint, will require additional people. We need to be building efficiency of operation and stability versus diffuse operations. I don't think it benefits our kids educationally. I don't think it benefits financially. If we move to a foundation formula structure, we will be giving an amount of money. The ability to govern and run this system will take significantly more financial resources than one of those school districts that John talked about where you've got one business. That money will be taken away from our kids' education because you're only given a pot of money, right? We're given a pot of money for special education services. We're given a pot of money per student for the foundation formula. So I think that as we decide, as we continue to monitor things and decide what we're going to be advocating for and talking about and points to raise, I think these are really important considerations for us as we really try to think about what's best for all of our kids, right? So I think just points I wanted board members to hear, things that are swirling around my head. While you're going to need to decide as a board what's the work you want to do, I can assure you I will continue to be very actively involved in the discussions and continuing to offer solutions that do support the system that we have here for all of our kids.
Thank you, Randy. Herb.
Since this is almost certainly my last meeting on kind of moving out of the district, I'm tempted to comment on the pros and cons of the proposals and also to say a few more words. I'm going to about an effort to obey the compelled support clause of the Warren Constitution and whatever solution we come up with. But I just want to get back to Melanie's opening comment. I think we need to do something to enable the leadership of the district to react pretty quickly to what's going on in the legislature. I don't think relying on a special meeting of the board is going to get things done fast enough. So I'd like to move that we authorize the chair, consulting with the vice chair and the clerk as the chair deems necessary, to take a position on behalf of the board that is based on three things: the merger agreement, which is sort of like our Constitution, the vote that, I forget who mentioned from, I think it was 3 years ago, about endorsing our current system, and the policies we've adopted in policy governance. So that's my motion.
Seconded.
Is that Ben?
Yeah.
I did not get all that written down.
I'm sure Don did.
Don, did you get all that? Do further discussion on that? Yes, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm not, not necessarily against the motion. However, I think it should be modified, and I'll offer an amendment to that motion. And I can do that later or do it now, but I'll explain my rationale associated with that. I think Herb left out the superintendent in that discussion, so I think
Friendly amendment.
a friendly amendment in that regard. So I think we should add the superintendent to that small group discussion, and it has to be agile and has to move quickly, and I think it's a good group, and we certainly trust them, or at least I do. Secondly, though, I think we have to look at additional criteria a little bit above and beyond what Herb has offered, and I would add two things. One would be that we consider that any legislation should consider cost containment measures. And secondly, any legislation should be sensitive to efficient and effective governance. Speaking to the issues that were raised by Jonathan and Randy about the Senate bill in its current structure being so complex with so many different configurations that it's not going to be good for cost containment nor educational quality. So I think those two additional factors have to be added to the motion, and I'll make that as part of a motion.
I'll second that.
I'd take that as both as friendly amendments.
Okay. Can I ask the board, it was my intention to allow public comment before we vote on a motion specifically, so I just want to make sure that we're all clear just holding that motion open. Any other comment from our board before we move to public comment?
I just have a question. Are we going to discuss federal actions? Are we going to table that till next meeting? I mean, there's not really much to
We
say.
could table the.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's up to you, I just wanted to know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up, Brady, thank you. I would,
You could just enter this one.
to just enter the agenda update on federal actions and potential local impact as an update. Did everybody see that in their packet? You can go through it. Yeah, and I'll just offer, there are a lot of changes at the federal level, specifically regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Taconic and Green policies and procedures often include provisions to be aware and frankly, make sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is part of the way we approach education. So we know right now, with those changes coming, something we have to keep our eye on and in the future discuss how or what actions we would want to take as a board regarding if and how we would want to change our policies and procedures and just address them.
Well, just, and
Want
also,
to add to that, Ben?
well, I had a comment actually before we got into the federal pieces, but linked to that, it's just the recognition that we're definitely far from alone in our policies and the way we structured things in the state, and that the VSBA has issued policy guidance on that, the AOE has issued policy guidance on that, so we're gonna be hearing it from the response at that level. It's gonna be informative for us. But I did want to, as the seconder of Herb's motion, I'm in agreement with the friendly amendments that just make that point of clarity. But I think this is not necessarily another amendment, but just something that I notice a lack of communication about in last night's presentation and in the bills as presented. Understanding they haven't gone to Ways and Means yet, but that the lack of information around school facilities construction and renewal funding, to me is glaring,
Huge.
because that is just an enormous
Well,
issue.
the House bill addresses it doesn't provide an answer.
Right.
But it is, addressed in the
There's
House
something
bill.
in there, but it's not, and I recognize it still has to go to Ways and Means, and so we may see some information on that. But in our communication with legislators as representatives of the board, I think, especially considering our plans and the work that we're going on, that has to be part of the thing that we're
Agreed.
probing about and asking questions about. So I did want to raise that. And then the other piece that I just have found really glaring in listening to presentations and reading through the legislature is often the separation of what looks good on paper and the realities of our state. And to talk about districts spanning from Pownell to Chittenden, and knowing people who work and live in those communities, being able to know people who work and live in Chittenden and Pownell well enough to provide for them and to support them is just, it's a little different operating a 7,000 pupil district that sits within 10 square miles versus one that
Right.
sits within a couple thousand.
1,500.
So sometimes it feels like that gets missed, and I do think it's our responsibility as a rural district that has gone through consolidation process to reach efficiency, that there are limits to what really can work before costs start going up again. So I just think that's I have felt that as someone who's spent a lot of time working to think about this, that is just missing in the conversation.
Thank you, Ben. Do we feel good about doing public comment? Great. So I'll just reiterate, we have 20 minutes set aside at 7:25, so we'll try to wrap this up at 7:45 in an effort to,
Keep going. I just have them use the mic.
just in an effort to move things along, so we can also have the other heavy discussion we have after this one. Again, I do want to hear all of your voices, and we also want to allow you to, maybe restate or rephrase, but if possible, if a simple, just I agree with what was said, we can mark that down. And if you would not mind getting up using the mic and go ahead and state your name when you'd like to speak, I'm happy to take public comment.
Check the board. Is there anybody on the board?
That's interesting.
I see none. Okay,
Wait,
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Tucker Jones. I'm from Manchester. I moved here 6 years ago from Massachusetts. I have 3 boys. Over my 6 years, my children have attended Maple Street, SMS, PBA, and Long Trail. So I feel like I'm a fairly decent representation of the benefits of school choice. And I just wanted to read a prepared statement about school choice. Noting that last night there were, I think, based on Mark Tajan's information, there were 1,000 people in attendance and over 3,100 people live streaming. Overwhelming majority was that school choice is something that people find very valuable and want to continue to have. Excuse me. Last night's education meeting was another demonstration of our community's overwhelming support for our education system, particularly school choice and access to independent schools. As part of the Senator's presentation, it was troubling to see that several organizations are actively working against our local system, including the VSBA and the VSA. Our community is already fighting an uphill battle on the issue of school choice. Statewide, only 4% of students use town tuition to access independent schools, and there are powerful vocal forces advocating in Montpelier to dismantle our system of choice. We need to ensure that local education leaders do not send mixed messages that lend credibility to those loud voices who are working so hard to destroy this local system. I hope you will look at the original articles of agreement that our community voted on when forming this district, along with overwhelming advisory vote that was taken just a few years ago as our guide and our North Star. Your policies, your actions as a board, and the work that the superintendent should all be consistent with the clear mandate expressed by the voters at this formation of the district and with the recent advisory vote. The people want school choice. I appreciate everyone's effort, time, and attention to this complex system. I just want to make sure that people understand that we're at an inflection point in this vote, call it, and if we get too far down the line, it's going to sit in politicians' hands, and I feel it's very important that people as a community that appreciate and rely on the complex nature of the school system, whether it be public or independent, understand how important it is for this region and for people coming into this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker. Anybody else like to speak before we move to our action item? Yeah.
I have a question for the audience, brought up by a comment just before the meeting by a fellow board member, which I think was really important. What advice would you give us about persuading senators and representatives from districts that don't have a traditional academy to persuade them that what we want is at the very least neutral for them, if not actually good for them? Because if I'm a representative from, let's say, Colchester, I'm not sure I'm going to be particularly sympathetic to what our representatives from around here say, unless somebody can show me that what a representative from Manchester wants will at least not cost Colchester more than Colchester already spends, for example. So what's out there that we can use to persuade people from outside our area to help us preserve what we have?
I have a comment. I prefer not to use microphones. If I was up against that question, what I would say on behalf of all of us, what we want is for our children to have access to the basics. Nurses, algebra, school lunch, buses, an opportunity to learn foreign language. If you look at the impact that foreign language has on one's success, both getting into college, the matriculation that a school sees when it has the support of foreign language, and then their earning capability once they are out into the real world. So what I believe we all want for this area is to see it thrive, not survive. And some of those things that I just mentioned are not made commonplace in all schools. So what we need everyone to recognize at a statewide level is that what we are asking for is the basics. Right? We have the lowest fertility rate of any state in America, one of the oldest populations. It's very, very hard to get people to move here that are our age. The people in this room are the ones that care and actually are really democratic in terms of what we want. It's the basics. So I think what I would say is that can we get back to getting the basics right? If Vermont wants to thrive, it needs to get the basics right.
And maybe drop sex ed too,
Yeah.
or that fertility rate? Joking, Andy.
Bad joke.
Would you mind moving up to the microphone so we can hear you better?
I prefer not to, I hear if that's all right. I'll speak loudly.
Stand up.
As Phil Scott unveiled his plan to create 5 school districts, in his speech, I'm almost certain I heard him utter the words of ex-naying school lunches. And I feel like that is one thing I would love from this board, is to emphasize the fact that our community likes but also needs school lunches. And I don't think that's something that we should be giving away or getting rid of anytime soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrew Baisley. I'm a Manchester resident. I think I'm preaching to the choir in this room, but I just want to say we moved to Manchester about a year ago from Singapore, and I have an 8-year-old. The reason that we moved here, well, there's a lot of benefits to this community. We love it here. We've come here, 20 plus years. We come here to ski, but one of the reasons that we moved here is because of the IB education opportunity that Long Trail offers. And I think there's a lot of stories like ours of people that come to this community because of the way the education system works here. And that's really important to us, and I think it's like a core piece of the fabric of the community.
Really upset about school choice, but some of it's like, you drive by a public school. Oh my gosh.
Wendy, did you mean to unmute yourself? I'm gonna say no. If anybody online would like to speak, go ahead and use the hand raise feature and we'd be happy to recognize you. Okay.
Hey, I just, to respond to Herb and what you guys were discussing, I support you guys speaking more publicly about how this would affect us and being sort of our advocates, because I think not everyone can follow what's going on in the legislature, what's going on here. Like, you guys get it, but it feels like your hands are tied, like you can't like weigh in on everything. Like, I want you guys to weigh in, like you guys get this better than the average person, so please advocate on behalf of us. And I agree with the question of, yeah, something isn't adding up. If this is saving people money, I don't understand why. It's like if we would have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to build new public schools, why are they opposing independent school? Like, so it seems like there's ignorance, like, and people just need to be educated about what's actually happening. So I think we need your help. You guys get it. So, like, send out letters. Like, we'll sign. Like, we'll give it to friends. Yeah, we just need your help in spreading the word, because I don't think everyone gets it.
Thank you. Can you, folks, for the record, say...
Mark Phillips, Dorset.
Thank you. And can I get your name also?
Anne Hatfield, Dorset.
Hatfield, you said? Just one second, I just want to make sure I get this. And the gentleman in the back first.
Daniel Jazz.
Thank you. J-A-Z? Jazz?
J-E-Z.
J-E-Z, thank you. Go ahead, thank you for
My
waiting.
name is Julie.
Flip a coin.
My name's Kim Weisswood, I'm in Manchester, and I think you made a really good question, and I was thinking about what you were saying as well, and I work at the hospital, right? And we are having a really hard time hiring people, and the healthcare system in the state is suffering, but in Southern Vermont, it's especially suffering. And I just think about making Southern Vermont a harder place to live by taking away something that draws people to move here is going to negatively impact all the systems. And I worry that it would negatively impact our healthcare system because we like literally can't hire people. And so if you say, well, if you move here, you know, we've got this amazing independent school network, that's a draw for doctors, that's a draw for nurses. And I don't think we should be advocating the state to do anything that makes it harder to draw families to Southern Vermont. And another thing I've been thinking about a lot, and I've listened to the last board meeting, and I know we're discussing this next, but I wonder if any conversation has been had about expanding school choice for all 7th and 8th graders in the district, as opposed to creating a new middle school or moving the middle schoolers. Now that I can see how much enthusiasm there is around school choice, and I know some schools have it and some don't, when I listened to the last meeting, I was thinking, we're talking about building a whole new middle school. Have we thought about expanding school choice in middle school and letting the independent schools rise to the challenge of that?
Thank you.
My name is Julie Adair, and my husband and I and my 2 daughters and their families escaped from Texas because of the crumbling public school system and the voucher system. And we looked at schools nationwide, and we chose Vermont. My daughters researched all the schools, and we actually drew a circle around Floodbrook and BVA. Then we chose our homes. And so we all sold our homes, and we moved here for the schools. And we were so thrilled when our kids came home and told us all about their new schools and the forest learning and all of the opportunities. And I asked my oldest grandson, all 4 of our grandchildren are in Floodbrook. I asked him, how was his first day of school? And do you know what he said? He said, they treat me like a person. So I'm seeing a lot of numbers. I don't want my grandson to be a number again. And just take into consideration what the difference it makes, what we're doing here.
Thank you, Julie.
I'm Gus Pabst, Dorset.
Thank you, guys.
Former Manchester man, Spurburn. Just a quick question. For the next conversation, we were able to see analysis done by a consulting firm pretty quickly around things like transportation. What kind of analysis has been done to get to your question around how independent schools have been a neutral impact compared to the other schools in terms of to try to advocate with more factual information versus a lot of the sounds like guessing and just not knowing going on in places? And then how has that been working with maybe the select boards for the various towns? Because it's expensive to do analyses, but it's not just from what everybody's saying here. It would benefit all aspects of the towns for school choice or the way we do our education out here to be advocated for more. Thank you.
Thank you, Gus.
Hi, I'm Brittany Dombrowski, Manchester, but I teach at Dorset. One thing that I was just thinking about in terms of what we could say to other representatives is it's being touted in the news all over about the chronic absenteeism that's been an issue all across the country since the pandemic. And I know working at Dorset, small town, small community, that I'm struggling in my classroom. I have several children who are over the who've missed over 10% of the school year, which is 18 days. In my at this point, obviously that hurts the kids because they're not getting their education, it hurts test scores. There's a lot of problems with that. And I noticed last night, I was at the BBA meeting, and one of the things, and I think it was the house's plan, mentioned up to a 75-minute commute to get to schools, particularly for high schoolers. Now, if I'm having issues getting kids that live 5 minutes down the road into my classroom, I can't even imagine the issues that you could get if you have a 75-minute commute. You know, these are kids in my classroom who are offered transportation, they have bus, they don't take it, I guess. They, you know, are either coming in an hour and a half late, they are missing, you know, 20 days of school out of 185. So I can't even imagine how much the absenteeism rate is going to skyrocket, and the tardy, the amount of tardies would skyrocket if we went with that plan.
Thank you, Amber. I don't see any other comments in the crowd. Anybody online want to use the hand raising function if you'd like to speak before we move? I'm going to go with a no. Thank you, folks. I appreciate all of your comments. And I think some of those comments will probably be addressed in the next topic. So rather than answer questions now, we'll kind of wait till that comes around. So I guess I would raise with the board, action item D, we have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Do we feel ready to vote, or do we want to have more discussion on that? Okay. All in favor of the motion made by Herb to essentially give permission, I'm going to paraphrase this, knowing that it has already been stated, hopefully for the record. Giving permission to the chair in coordination with the vice chair and the clerk and the superintendent to act when necessary in regards to communicating with legislature, specifically around our ends policies and the things that we know to be important to our district, and adding the friendly amendments of cost containment and being as sensitive to efficient and effective governance. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 6 this time. Our executive limitations. We have a presentation, school reconfiguration at the request of the board, I think specifically around transportation. And at this point, Randy, I will turn it over to the superintendent.
All right. Thank you very much. I feel a little bit like we need like a 7th inning stretch. Whereas Paul Eaton would tell me this probably, is that the right phrase? It is.
You got it.
I usually botch it somehow, and he's like, just stop with the sports analogies, because I get them wrong. If you want to stretch for a second or whatever, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm just going to start. But if you need to move, stand up, be comfortable. So, I'm going... Rosanna, how do I do this? The forward arrow. There you go. Okay, thank you. Okay, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Randy Lowe, and I'm the superintendent here at the BRSU. And transportation has been a topic that's come up for, we've been talking about a middle school reconfiguration for about 2.5 years, and transportation continues to surface as, a primary concern. What do different iterations of different models of reconfiguration of our school district look like? So Derek Connells is in the back, Adam Bass is in the back. Derek oversees our transportation, Adam is director of facilities. And when I left the last meeting and said, hey, I want us to try to get this all figured out, they really rallied to work with me, and we've spent a lot of time on this. So thank you. And if I have questions, I will defer to you. And as we go through this, if you have questions and you want to talk about more details, please let us know. I'm not going to go through all of the docs at the end. For those folks who were wondering about some of the details, we included a number of appendices at the end. I encourage you to look at them if you have questions. But I wanted for everyone to be able to see what we were doing. So, all right. So the last meeting, the board asked us to look at considering options A1, B1, and H1, and I've outlined what each of these are up here. I'll give folks a chance to look at this. We'll talk about them as we dive into each one. This presentation is organized in a way that is going to take one iteration and go through the impact on towns one at a time. So there are a couple different ways we could do it. That's how we decided to. So the first one we're going to talk about is going to have Dorset be a K-6 school. I'll tell you across the board, pre-K is sort of up in the air. So I've shared before that we really don't know where we will and won't be able to potentially expand pre-K programming. If we can expand it, we will expand it. But there's a lot of like child laws and regulations through the Child Development Division that govern whether we can, as a public entity, open a pre-K program. So anywhere it says K, just know if we can open one, we would like to. So Dorset, grades K-6, MEMS pre-K to 6, middle school at the current MEMS building, and Floodbrook K-6. That's the first kind of transportation proposal we're going to look at today. I want to say that as we are talking about reconfiguring this system, I am, for the sake of ease of communication, I'm identifying schools and spaces by terms that we currently know. As we think about reconfiguring our system and combining schools now, like combining schools that currently exist, my goal is that we are creating something new. So it isn't that students and teachers are coming to a system that is already in place. It is really building something new. So at some point, the names of these are going to switch and shift, because it's, I think, a really important mindset for us to shift. So if I sort of go on a bird walk on some of that stuff, you'll know that I'm really just future thinking. So in this model, Courier students will attend Dorset, and Sunderland students will attend the current MEMS building. So here's a map. It's a little bit wonky just because of the size, but we've got Floodbrook on the mountain, we've got the MEMS building, and we've got Dorset. So, can I move this thing? So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time, once I go through this first time, a lot of the slides are very similar, so I'm not going to just spend time going into detail. Right now, for Sunderland residents, you'll see in the morning, the morning run is about 45 minutes. Right now, the bus stops at Skyline Drive, which is that road to Equinox, and kids get off and get on another bus, right? So that's been a challenge. Some folks have had some concerns about that, but that's the way we've had to run it thus far. It's the way it's been for a very long time. And then in the afternoon, it's about 45 minutes from like the school to the last drop-off, and for grades 7 through 12, it's about an hour. So those times you're going to see are pretty consistent. We do have a lot of runs across our entire system that are upwards of an hour from the time a first student is picked up and dropped off. That's not unusual across the state, and it's been true for our system for as long as I've known it. So that's nothing new, okay? If we forecasted transportation Sunderland students to Manchester, it would be about 50 minutes. There would be, is it the older kids that would potentially swap or not? Are we running both buses up in this?
Swap any kids.
Okay. So we're going to run 2 routes, which is different. So we'll run both into town and not have to stop, and that'll take about 50 minutes for that route from the first student to the last drop-off.
That was it, the first student to last drop?
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't
Yep.
mean average ride time?
No, all of these numbers are
Emphasize
first
that,
student
yeah.
pickup to last student drop off. So, so then there'll be kids, you know, then there'll be some in 5 minutes, right? But first to drop off, or vice versa. Sorry. What button am I supposed to push? You might have to click on the slide.
You might have to click on the slide.
What?
I got you.
Click on the slide.
Yeah. So let's get the cursor on the slide.
Oh, my cursor's not, and my little remote doesn't work?
Yeah, it should work now.
Okay. Thanks, team. Brittany, thanks for the help out there. It really takes a minute. So Mount Tabor and Danby, so this is up Route 7A. Right now, it's about 35 minutes. We have 2 buses that run, so from the first student pickup to the Courier Memorial School is about 35 minutes. There's, and then in the afternoon, we've got 1 bus, and that takes about an hour start to finish for the drop-off. For students in grades 6 through 12, it's about an hour when they all come down and go to MEMS, BBA. Those are the only 2 places we're dropping off, right? MEMS and BBA right now from Courier. So it's about an hour. And then we have 1 student right now who we also bus up to Mill River. As we look ahead to this model, it's looking, we're going to run 2 routes, a north route and a south route, and they'll each be approximately an hour from first pickup to drop off down to Manchester. Dorset, right now we've got 2 morning runs, about 40 minutes for student drop off. You're getting the drill here, I'm sure. Afternoons are about 40 minutes. And high school, there are fewer kids that ride in the bus, and that takes about 35 minutes. So there'll be 2 bus routes to Dorset and then to MEMS, which are approximately 50 minutes for in the future, and then 9 through 12 remains about 35 minutes. Mountain Towns, so Mountain Towns is Londonderry, Peru, Weston, and Landgrove up on the mountain for Floodbrook School. This is where, with Mountain Towns, is where you're going to see the most variability, so we'll spend the most time on this as we run through the other 2 versions. So we are not fully staffed right now as far as bus drivers. You're going to see that right here we've got that there's 4 bus routes typically, and we have door-to-door pickup up there. So usually about 50 minutes from the first pickup to school for the longest route up on the mountain, and we have all 4. Right now, we've got 2 bus routes with centralized stops. So that means that right now on the mountain, we're not offering door-to-door pickup because of the driver situation. So those buses are bus rides. Oh, sorry, I missed a 55 to highlight. 45 to 55 minutes, start to finish up there with the centralized route. And then we've got a bus that runs from the mountain down to BVA, and that's approximately an hour. That also has centralized stops. That's always had centralized stops, so that we've never run door-to-door service for our high school kids up on the mountain. So as we look at this, we're looking at, for elementary, keeping Floodbrook open, and we would have two routes with centralized bus routes that are about 55 minutes each. We are recognizing, and this is something that the board is going to have to consider as we think through wherever we're landing, is the idea of staggered starts. We want to be able to create the most efficient system we can, I believe we're going to be looking at the possibility of looking at school start times that are intentional in order to accommodate for transportation, which again that's not an uncommon thing, but we're noting here for the first time that we may need to look at staggered times, okay? And then again, if we're looking at bringing our middle schoolers down the mountain and our high schoolers, it's the same route. It would be the same centralized bus route, so we'd be putting middle schoolers on with the high schoolers to come down the mountain.
Can you go,
Okay.
I'm sorry, Randy.
Yeah.
Can you go back for the forecasted? Should not be grades 7 through 8 and 9 through 12. Isn't A1 a read maybe 7, 8, as
Oh,
opposed,
maybe, we might, yeah, it's definitely possible that we are,
yeah, right? Do I have that right? A1?
Yes.
7, 8.
Yes,
So-
it is 7,
So,
8, yep.
for example, Floodbrook would remain K through 6.
correct.
And then can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
On the Danby one, it says they'd be going to MEMS. Wouldn't they be going to Dorset?
That's the current model, you have to look at.
For the forecasted, it says transporting students to MEMS.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, yes, so it'll be a little bit less than that. They would go to Dorset.
Okay.
You're gonna find, I'm confident of it, some mistakes like that on here. We're looking at it a million times. We'll catch them. This is generally giving you an idea of what we're talking about. So, in B1, it was Courier, Sunderland, Dorset students attending MEMS. So we're looking at a new middle school, so new construction of a middle school, grades 6 through 8. MEMS, the current MEMS building operating pre-K through 5, and Floodbrook staying open K to 5. Okay, so you'll see that. What am I supposed to do?
Just click on it and then, there you go. And you can go back.
So, yeah, we've got the mountain, and then we've got MEMS and Dorset schools very close to each other here. So this is very similar, because this is exactly the same. They're going to MEMS, they were going to MEMS on the last one, so this information is the same as you saw before. Here's Danby and Mount Tabor. So we had the same information at the top. Again, this north and south route, about 50 minutes coming into town. They're not recommending centralized routes for us for this because the buses they're on the route anyway, and that I think is. Okay. Thanks, Eric. Dorset, again, very similar. It's not, so from Dorset, but we're not dropping off at Dorset here. Yeah, so 10 more minutes? Yeah. Roughly? So you'd be looking at about 50 minutes on 50 minutes or so on the runs. Yeah, in the forecast we got it. Okay, so it's about 50. All right? For mountain towns, we've got all the same information right now for current transportation. As we look at the forecast, still coming down the mountain, it's all very similar up there with this, 55 minutes roughly from first student pickup, drop off to school, and about an hour down the road, down the mountain to school.
Okay.
Dick?
We got a very interesting proposal during our big meeting that suggested that perhaps the board should also consider building a new elementary school on a single level and putting the middle school at MEMS. We could do all of these transportations iterations if the architects who were instructed to also consider for each of the A1, B1, and H1 proposals of maybe it would be an elementary school rather than a middle school, but we'd still have a central middle school. We could do the same thing with respect to transportation requirements. If it were a middle school at MEMS, not an elementary school in H1. Is that correct? We could do the same process.
Yeah.
We can go through this process, you're saying, Dick?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's.
Sure.
Thank you.
Right, we would do that for
Yeah.
anything else that we do. I think it's important for us to consider the transportation requirements for anything else that is discussed. Okay, and then this, essentially H1 is new structure with all students in TNG attending elementary school in Manchester and a middle school in Manchester. The breakdown of grade levels is pre-K to 4, and then middle school is 5 to 8, mostly to balance out the numbers a little bit more than a pre-K to 5 and then a 6 through 8 middle school. Not going to run through this. You've seen this. This is all the same. This is all the same. And then mountain towns. So when we look at mountain towns, now we're coming down, we're looking at about 65 minutes, so we're getting up over that hour mark, and that's to go to Manchester. If the mountain town students are going even further, to Dorset, for instance, we'd be looking at more like 75 minutes for those kids. And then 9 to 12 remains about an hour.
And then would the K through 8 be the centralized bus stops because it's not?
Yes,
specified?
it would all be centralized.
Okay.
Yeah, it would all be centralized coming down.
Randy, do we have any data on how far people are driving to get to those centralized stops?
I'm sure that you've got to have the data on the families for the stops.
Right.
But it's also going to be a safe place to learn bus around.
Do you have any sense up on the mountain about what?
Like how much time are we adding?
How many miles parents are driving to the centralized stop? Okay, we could look, because we've got the addresses of all the families. I'm sure we could run it if it was something, at least to give a sense of some of what the outline, the farthest addresses are, what that drive is like for the stops right now.
It'd just be nice, because if you look at these numbers and you say it's 65 minutes, but when you're comparing kid-to-kid experience, it's 75 minutes versus the other numbers, which are real, kid-to-kid numbers if they're house-to-house. So, right, so I just think we got to be aware of that as a board of what we're asking for, what we'd be asking for.
Yep, absolutely, and I think that, we're going to continue as we move through this to get more and more detail. John?
What is, I know you can't quote this off the top of your head, but what is our current ridership generally on average? All of our schools, if you know it, just like percentage, what percentage of our kids ride the bus?
You probably know the numbers. You know the numbers more than the percentage.
All buses come in pretty full.
How many students?
Most parents drive their kids in. A lot of parents drive their kids in, not most.
So I guess on any given day across our system, how many kids are taking the bus? Can you, like a ballpark?
I can't.
Yeah.
We can get it.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask that, I know it's an impossible metric to get, but like, related to Ben's point, like kid hours, like what is the number of, which sounds like a cool stat, the number of added kid hours would be with any of these permutations, how many kid hours are we adding, right, to be on the bus?
Right.
Can I ask one other? Oh, go ahead.
I can probably sit down. I think we're done with this, right? So if you want some of the details, right, they're all in the back. We're not going to go through that. But if folks wanted them, we could present them. Ben?
Suzanne just, muttered at something to the side to me over here. We're just saying, in Rutland, and so this is secondhand, I don't know what the total accuracy is, but in Rutland, they don't offer busing within a certain radius from the school.
Right.
So if you live within a certain radius, and there's not busing, so it's focused the busing on the outlying regions.
Right.
And I wonder, it's just another thing for us to consider here. As someone, one of those, John, you asked how many kids are on the bus versus not, drop off, and anecdotally, I live on the mountain, and I live about 10 minutes from the school if I drive straight there. If I drive to the bus stop, it takes me 10 minutes to get to the bus stop, and then he sits on the bus for 10 minutes. But because the drop-off and pickup lines are so long, it's faster for him to take the bus and me to pick him up on the bus. So it's like there's all sorts of funky considerations with it. And I think this is great for us to do and just to get some hard numbers. But there's a lot of nuance to
For sure.
what really makes sense for people.
Suzanne?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. So just thinking about the kids in the very outlying areas, if we could cut some of that time maybe by sort of taking a page out of another district's book, where if it is really close, because I know, even when I'm driving in Manchester, I don't know if that's actually our BSU buses, but I know they're coming from, inside Manchester, that short route on 7A to MEMS or to, up through Dorset. So maybe that's something to consider, is just taking the responsibility for people who are very, very close by and figuring that out. I mean,
We're looking at the transportation policy.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that those are all, right, they're all incredibly relevant considerations, and as we look ahead, we should be continuing to think about ride time and drive time, and I think that, for any student, it's a long school day, right? They're in school for 7 hours, and then, they've got an hour before, an hour after, they've got activities, right? We think about the whole child and their whole experience, right, and what we're doing, and it's all relevant. It's all very important as we consider the overall experience our kids are having.
John, did I see you had your hand up?
Yeah, I have a vague recollection, I might be totally inventing this, but maybe in a past district or somewhere else in Vermont, has it ever been a practice to offer stipends to families who are like it's a real hardship to take a bus, and let's say way out in the corner of Weston, let's say, has that ever been a practice anywhere in Vermont that you're aware of, as an option, as a stipend to ease the hardship of, with carpooling? I don't know what it may be, but is that, am I inventing this? Did this ever happen?
It has happened.
Okay.
You're not inventing it.
Okay, good. All right, good.
Sounds like your answer.
All right.
Yeah, do you want to add to that,
Well,
Lindsay?
no, I'd just say, off of what Suzanne was saying, if you are putting MEMS as the centralized elementary school, and then you're telling parents, well, if you live in a certain district, you should drive your kids to school, we're then adding more chaos to the MEMS school.
But for those of us that grew up in Rutland that walk to school.
But you know parents are not gonna,
No.
of kindergartners and walk them to MEMS, so now we're
Right.
adding more driving to already compact situations, so then that's where I would think, if that's where we want to go, then possibly doing MEMS as the middle school and the elementary school different, because I agree, if you live in town, it might be easier to drop off than take the bus for an hour. But then we have to think, any person who's been to MEMS in the morning knows already it's chaos. So if we're then incentivizing dropping off, then maybe
Yeah,
we need to consider that not being.
That whole drop-off would be completely redesigned.
Right.
So wherever we're going in the future, that chaos will not be a part of future plans.
And I get what you're saying, but I think you tried quite a few times to implement things and parents aren't.
I know now
always.
I know now the process to close a road.
Okay.
Dick, go ahead.
I'd like to know if these times are predicated on good weather, and the impact of the occasional bad weather in Vermont, 2 or 3 days or so.
Yeah, sometimes the weather's not great in Vermont, Derek. How does that affect our bus routes in?
Those numbers were figured out in normal.
It takes longer when the weather's bad.
I appreciate it, actually. Just take your time.
Other comments? Anecdotally, I'll just add, when my son was at Sunderland, we lived 2 miles from the school, and during the fall, his bus route was an hour, and then they switched after Christmas, and in the spring, his bus route was 3 minutes. And that was just part of the system that we've already kind of always known here, which is tricky, but an hour works. And maybe we switch it up after Christmas, who knows, I don't know.
So at this point, it's informational, right?
Yeah.
Folks, you asked for it, we pulled it together. There is definitely more additional details we can get. I wrote down some of the notes, but I wanted us to be able to get that to you, so you had it for your information as we continue the discussions.
Yeah, thank you, Randy, and thank you, Derek and
Adam.
everyone else who worked on Adam, whoever worked
Yes,
on this.
thank you very much.
Thank you. There's a lot of information.
Celeste for the, yeah, there were mistakes, sorry about the typos, but it was a lot of work in a short period of time, so.
We have on the agenda here an action item. I think we can go ahead and just talk about this quickly before we move to the public comment on this. We have, or if we want to not do this at all, but the action item we have is we have talked to the public about going out to our communities before we made any final decisions. And I thought it might be helpful for our communities to know, especially when we have meetings like this that have these key points in them. Do we want to, as a board, vote to make sure that we're not eliminating any options until we do kind of fulfill that idea of going out?
Or adding
to
some.
separate?
You might add some.
Can we add some before then?
Whoever would like to make a motion on this action, we can discuss how that goes.
I would make the motion that the board agree not to eliminate any option or potentially add some options before we make final decisions or eliminate anything that has been on the table.
I don't know what that means. Second.
I will, Dick made the motion, Suzanne seconded, but let's get some discussion on that. I'm not sure if it's,
Dick, do you mean or and?
And
Yeah, it's better with and.
so I'll ask a question. So are you clarifying that with and, you're saying we would not add any new options without getting further public input?
I meant that if a reasonable proposal was made by the public, or the board came up with something that might modify the three, because we were restricted to just three options. And I'm particularly thinking of the proposal that instead of building a middle school, we build an elementary school, which resonated with loud applause at the last, at our general information meeting. So I think it's or, but not and. Yes.
Go ahead, Herb.
I think and serves your purpose.
Well, then I agree with Ann. You're the lawyer. I'm not going to court.
What are we gonna do with that, Herb?
I need to think about this. I'm not really sure. Go ahead. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I need a little more clarification on what Dick is suggesting, I guess. So we want to get public input first on the three alternatives,
Three or more.
three or more.
If something comes up,
But how does something come up? Can it come up from the board now, or does it come up from only the
it
public?
could come up as something that we think needs further study.
When?
Can I make a suggestion on
Yeah.
this? That rather than talk about adding two, because I think at any point we're open to adding two, and I think the nature of this and why it was brought to us was to make sure that we weren't going to eliminate anything at a meeting that is a general meeting.
Okay,
And
then
that is
I'll-
the nature of this.
Then I'll revise it to just, the board vote to not eliminate options or make a final decision until public input is provided. And as we narrow options, we'll continue to consult, but I'm specifically referring to, we're getting close to having enough information to possibly make a decision, and so I'm visioning in June. We want to make sure that the public weighs in at great length on adequately provided information as the board gets ready to make a decision, and that we won't do that until that possibility is provided to the public.
So Suzanne, it sounds like to me the amendment was, the action was amended to not include the and or, and I just want to make sure it's a separate. Great. Go ahead, Jim.
I think, also the public discussion could lead to, and to some extent it already has led to, people making suggestions of other things that we want to consider. So I think it's important that we acknowledge that, we should consider those those other suggestions as well.
Since,
Yeah.
since there's a lot of, like, bear with me, since obviously I'm new-ish, in looking at our agenda, is there a way to motion to be able to add, some of these other options that we've obviously seen onto the table to explore those before we go to the public? Because to more of an open.
Right.
I think that's important.
Go ahead, Rainey.
I'd like to add to what Kelsey just said. I think it's important. There's been a process that's, that we've used so far. And I think it's important for the board to establish with me, if we get new suggestions, what's the process we're going to use in order to vet those and have a discussion? Because I think that, some of my thoughts are that, we need to consider, well, a number of things. And so I'd like that for you to establish a process so that we all know what we're going to do and how long would we continue considering, right? Like, I think we just need some parameters on this because we have to keep moving forward, and I want to allow due process sort of to the work we're doing with whatever comes our way.
I have a question.
Sure.
Last meeting, when we went through the three options, correct me if I'm wrong, but two of these options still have fails as far as the state's criteria of students to teachers, which makes me nervous that I would agree that I think it's important to keep open to other options because two of our options potentially might not make it, they might be turned over anyway when it all happens.
Right. And, right.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that there's also, over the next couple of months, we'll get greater clarity around what are those levers that are being included in the bills, what are some of the parameters. And so we will continue with our work because I will continue to say to you, I think it's important for our kids, independent of what's happening at the state. This all started well before this. And it's independent of that. But let's make informed decisions along the way, right? I think that we're looking at, by the end of May, beginning of June, having a much better sense. So I do not want that. I mean, and maybe, and the board hasn't, I think, talked about that a lot, Rogan, but I would hate for us to be deciding on something because maybe it's something that all of us want, and then finding out that decision leads to a school closure that none of us want it to happen. So I think, we just keep working on it and won't make any decisions, I think, too quickly.
I think it would be good to add the option for building a new elementary school, unless there's some defect in it that hasn't occurred to us yet. But I think we should leave open the possibility that during public meetings, some other option surfaces that the board should consider. It's unfortunate because that would mean, let's say it happens at the third public meeting and we have 5, it means the first 2 didn't get a chance to opine on that. But I don't think it would make sense to say, well, once the public meeting starts, we're not going to consider anything else.
I do think at some point you have to. I don't know when that is, but I do think at some point you need to have things off the table. And I do have a number of comments that I don't have fully fleshed out that I think are important for the board to hear around the recommendation for the elementary middle school switch. There's been a lot going on, and I do not have them as formed as I'd like to sort of share them with you, but it's important information, I think, for you to hear as you determine, as you sort of weigh whether to consider another option.
Might I suggest then, for future agenda items, we just make sure we address the elementary switch and ask for your ideas around that. Not having fleshed that out and not having a process yet, let's just make sure that we have that at least on the agenda.
And John? As far as the motion goes, I think keeping it as that we won't take anything off until it's vetted, but as far as adding vetting new options, I'm comfortable with having the chair, the vice chair, and the superintendent to, if you're willing, to vet those options and whether they're appropriate to add to the table. I don't know if you want that on your plate or not, but I'm comfortable with that rather than us vetting all the options at every meeting. I'll leave it to you or another small group to do so.
So let's hold that idea real quick. Let's go ahead and vote on the action right now, which is for the board to not eliminate any options without going to public first. We have a first, a second discussion. I'm going to call close on that unless there's any further thoughts. I'm all in favor of that motion. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? No, and that passes. John, why don't you go ahead and open up that motion again, if you don't mind just restating it.
I move that the chair, the vice chair, and the superintendent work to vet any future options with legislative, with considering what's going on in the legislature and future criteria.
Second.
Discussion. Yes.
I trust, especially with Randy and that group, because she's well aware, but the added cost and complexity to add options to the architect's planning process is not insignificant.
And I'll add too, I think, I don't know if this should be included or not, but as we go forward, I would expect that we would report out kind of what's come across the table and what we've been looking at so that you're fully aware that it has been discussed at the board level. And that way, if you disagree and want us to go further, as a board, then we can do that then. Any further discussion on that? Great. All in favor of approving John's motion?
Aye.
Please signify by saying aye. Thank you. Anybody opposed? Any folks abstaining? No? Okay, that motion passes. We have time now for public comment. Does the board want to speak any more on that, or are we ready to open for public comment? Great. Again, I'm looking for about 20 minutes is what I'm hoping we can accomplish for public comment. It is 8:25. That would close us out around 8:45. And if you would please, for the record, even if you can't get up to the mic, state your name just so we can have it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather Davis Miller. I'm a Dorset resident. I've been living in Vermont for about 8 years, and we were living down the road in Arlington, and we moved to Dorset to want to be close to our cousins, and also for the schools. I have 3 kids, they're 2, 3, and 4. So I'm a little raggedy right now because I don't sleep. And I don't read, so I might be a little bit ignorant on this, but can you share more about the President's executive order on school choice and how that might impact some of the conversations that we're having here today and across the state?
I can't personally, I'm not sure that any of us have really looked at his orders on, because I don't think there's anything formulated that I know of exactly around school choice at this moment.
There is there was in the agenda packet. I can read it in a second, but I don't know if I don't have any insight on it.
But is it an actual bill or order? Was it recommendations? He's looking at
We
it.
haven't heard anything from the Agency of Education around it. And I don't know, so I haven't heard anything sort of through my typical channels.
One thing to note is a lot of the information we're getting, in here was something from the New York State School Boards Association, but actually I should have made sure everybody had. There's also one from the Vermont School Boards Association, and they're keeping up with all of the executive orders and the dear colleague letters that have come out of Washington that could potentially have an impact. They're also, VSBA on our behalf, they've, on one of the policy directions, they've asked for and actually received some clarification from the Agency of Education on how we should deal with those issues. You know, at this point, it's been very difficult. There are a lot of people in the state who are very concerned about the possibility of school districts being targeted for acting inconsistently with executive orders from DC, when that is actually, those executive orders are inconsistent with direction that we've been provided by local Vermont authorities. Really, that's, you know, it is such a mess right now. There's a real effort underway to understand that. You know, especially, you know, superintendents have been concerned because they're, you know, right in the front line of this. And, you know, there's the, you know, to date, the one specific question that went to the Agency of Education and responded to by the Secretary and their counsel had to do with trans kids, and the response was essentially, we've given you guidance before, stick with that guidance at this point. I think the Agency of Education is in a tough spot too, because it's kind of hard to predict how things will come out. But we're, you know, at this point, I think what we can say is, you know, there's a lot of awareness of the issue and the concerns, but we don't have a lot of good answers at this point. We're hoping to get better guidance going forward. But, you know, there are some school districts, we're holding some of these discussions because there have been some districts that have held discussions specifically to say, okay, there may be a risk associated with the way we're operating now, but we're willing to take that risk. There are some boards that have, you know, taken that straight out. I think with our boards, it's just important that we understand what the risks are before we associated with our actions in such an uncertain environment. So we're working on it. But not great answers, I'm sorry.
It's on page 17 and 18, is the school choice item.
Hi everyone, I'm Alita Sprague. I'm a Dorset resident, and I have a daughter here in kindergarten at Dorset School and a younger child who's 2 years old. I'm here to speak about, I think, one of the new proposals that you were referring to. And I typed it up so I don't forget anything. So yeah, I wanted to share another idea for reconfiguration that arose out of a couple of conversations since the last board meeting among parents with children both at the Dorset School and at earlier, as well as parents who themselves attended Nance and Floodbrook. So some experience with a lot of schools in the district. So under this plan, we would propose to keep Floodbrook open, given the concerns, especially about travel and winter travel over the mountain. Renovate Men's to become a regional middle school for grades 5 through 8, which would also include school offices and a therapeutic program. And then build a new pre-K through 4th grade elementary school off of Raptor Lane in Dorset, which would serve children currently at Sunderland, Dorset, Courier, and Nance. So as many people may already know, Raptor Lane is a 308-acre, largely undeveloped property already owned by the town of Dorset. It's just behind J.K. Adams, a little bit further up Route 30. A new town office is being built on part of the property, and it also includes a relatively flat 46-acre parcel that we believe could easily accommodate a new elementary school with ample space for parking, drop-off and pickup, and green space for sports and activities. So our belief is that this would generally pass all the criteria established that we've looked at for other proposals, and also be responsive to some of the concerns and suggestions that have been raised at prior meetings. Having Men's as a middle school would limit the amount of new traffic going into Manchester compared to creating a larger pre-K through 8 school, or having both a regional elementary and middle school right in Manchester. It would also give older students walkability in town after school, whether they're going to after school job or sports activities or even just walking home. This plan would also create a centralized pre-K at the new school We believe it would limit bus rides to the 45 to 60-minute max, so obviously further modeling, if the board were interested in this, will be necessary. And it would allow for 2 sections per grade at the new elementary school, which we estimate would have about 400 students. And finally, our hope is that a new elementary school would be less expensive to build than a middle school that would require sports fields and more technical space, so again, that will require further analysis. But if built at Proctor Lane, this would take advantage of existing town-owned property, whereas to our knowledge, no specific site has yet been identified for a new school in Manchester. So that's it. Another possibility for consideration by the community and by the board. Yeah, so thank you to everyone for all the time, thoughtfulness you're putting into this, and all the creativity and collaboration around finding something that works for all our children, all our communities. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Meredith Eberts. I go to Floodbrook School. I have been at Floodbrook for 9 years. I'm here today to tell you about how being in a kindergarten through 8th grade school has made me a better person. One of the most powerful opportunities that I have at Floodbrook is being a role model for kindergarten through 5th graders. I currently serve on student government, where I help other students and teachers plan and present at all school meetings. Middle schoolers at Floodbrook get to stand up in front of our younger peers and show them what it looks like to be an active member of our school community. We have reading buddies where the 8th graders read to kindergartners and hang out once a week. In a regional middle school, this opportunity is lost. Being in a smaller middle school, I know each middle schooler's names, I know what advisory they're in, and I know details about their lives. I feel that this is something else that we would lose in a regional middle school. Middle school is a time where kids are nurturing communities to build strong relationships. It is difficult to do this when we put every middle school in one building and expect all of them to build the kind of community that we currently have in a smaller school. Another concern that some of my classmates and I have is sports. Currently, students feel comfortable trying out new sports as late as 8th grade. For example, I have friends who just started playing softball this year, and were excited and happy to join this sport. In a consolidated middle school, many students will feel intimidated by the amount of players and may worry that they will not get an opportunity to try new sports and play if teams require cuts. Even without cuts, there would just be too many kids to feel teams that work well together. Currently, BRSU schools play each other in addition to other schools. By combining middle schools, we have eliminated some of our closest opportunities for games. Games may be further away, and this also poses a difficulty for families and schools that are currently further from them. Will there be a late bus or a sports bus to take students up the mountain after practice? If so, will the BRSU have bus drivers to staff the route? There are too many questions about transportation to make these changes work. Speaking of busing, Floodbrook currently has effectively 2 main bus routes due to the shortage of drivers. In a consolidated middle school, bus rides will clearly be longer. Is it wise to put students whose frontal lobes are not done developing on the bus for longer periods of time when they struggle to make it 20 minutes without becoming a discipline problem for the driver? Do you remember what it was like to be on the bus when you were in middle school? There's usually only one adult on the bus. Because of where middle schools are developmentally, they do not always behave themselves. This would be a challenging situation for any middle schooler. At Floodbrook today, it feels like there's a lot of independence. Every adult knows who we are and knows our limitations. They trust us. They have built relationships with us. This will be hard in a bigger school where new students and new adults are getting to know each other, especially as class sizes in the new school increase. Currently in our school, kids and adults make relationships across grade levels with people who live in our communities, and these relationships exist in and out of school. We earn the trust of members of our community. We are able to prove our trust and help others in our school, using our independence and freedom to make our community a better place to live and grow. Thank you for listening to my thoughts and concerns. As you hear more about the different ways to improve schools, please consider my thoughts on keeping middle schools in a K-3 school.
I want to thank Meredith for her comments, and also again thank the board. These are all really difficult decisions to make. I want to revisit a point that one of you made at the last meeting, which is the idea that the status quo is still an option. want to point out yet again that regional middle school is not a plan that works. It's not a plan that is evidence-based. I'm a parent of a first and third grader at Floodbrook. I also teach social studies up there in 7th and 8th grade. Drive the bus sometimes, help out in clubs, you know, kind of all the things. And in reading some of the literature about it, there are a few things I wanted to highlight to the board. Number one is going all the way back to May of last year, an article in the Still Reporter by Margaret McLean talks about how consolidation has not saved taxpayer dollars and has eroded Vermont's support for public education. She cites the legislators' need for Act 46 of 2018, when Phil Scott first was in office, and developing a need to have reports, which were supposed to materialize in 2020, 2021, which we've yet to see. Research from the Connecticut School of Finance Project in 2019, which says there's no conclusive evidence that school district consolidation positively impacts student achievement. Research from around the country, which talks about the fact that most of the efficiencies that can be found already have been found. And again, just continuing to reiterate that none of these regional middle school models needs to happen in the system right now. We're talking about trying to beat someone to the punch on a decision that we don't even know is necessarily going to make. We don't even know what's going to happen with this model that's kind of being pushed on us. So I would just reiterate to the board that I think doing this is unwise. I don't think we have any academic real outcomes to prove that this is something that will be good, be good for middle schoolers. We're currently in a system where even in small schools we have students who are falling through the cracks. We have one program in Taconic Green School District which serves 7th and 8th graders. It's called the Success Program. Self-identified students who feel less comfortable in school, feel like it's not necessarily a successful place for them, can be served and build confidence, work on leadership and team building skills. That program started out small and continued to build over the years, and it currently serves over 56% of 7th and 8th graders in the Taconic Green School District. That's in a small system where, as Meredith pointed out, teachers know kids' names, they know where they live, they know their families, they know what they're into. We're going to push those kids into a regional middle school in a place where they're not going to have that same contact, they're not going to have those same adults. So to see that happen, I see two things going on right now. One is we're making the case that we're going to save money, which doesn't look like there's any evidence for. And in a system where I severely doubt we're going to float a bond to build a new school or to renovate a school of the likes that we probably need to, I have concerns about that as a taxpayer. As a parent, I have concerns about this idea of creating a system where we're really only going to increase equity for students who are already available to take advantage of it. The students who really need additional opportunities are going to be the ones who fall through the cracks in this new system. Right now, if your kid wants to play a sport that exists in another school, they can do that in the Taconic Green School District. If there's a program in another school, they can go there. They can get bused there. I just think it's worth pumping the brakes and thinking about this, and I just want to reiterate my support for one of your school board members who, in the last meeting, said status quo is still an option. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate your time.
I apologize for being up here again. I had one thing for each of the public comments and I couldn't consolidate them. First off, I want to say thank you for looking out for opportunities for kids. I think we all agree that we want more opportunities for our kids. We want more kids to be able to take advantage of these opportunities. And I can tell from what's being said that that's something that's on all of your minds, and I thank you for that. I want to implore you, though, to make sure that you're thinking about how things that sound like it's going to increase opportunities can actually end up hurting the majority. For example, I'm thinking about the world languages. I'm thinking about how, as of last year, Floodbrook, MEMS, and Dorset at least had in-person foreign language teachers. Then we were told it was expanding out to all the kids in the district. Sounds great. We want all the kids in the district to have foreign language. Well, Dorset's quit. I don't know where Floodbrook and MEMS left, but now we have no foreign language teachers. So instead of going from most of the kids getting it, we tried to expand it out to all of them, and instead nobody gets it. So I think that's an example of a case where we have best intentions, but we don't always think through the impact. And I know you could say, okay, when we have the bigger school, then that would get rid of some of those issues. But I'm also thinking about the other things that could be lost, such as at Dorset, we do a connections crew. where on every third Friday approximately, we have the kids have an assigned classroom that they go to where it's one kindergarten, one first grade, one second grade, one third grade. So you get one kid from each grade that comes to your classroom. The kindergartner gets there because the seventh or eighth grader picks them up and brings them to it because they might not remember where to go. And I can't imagine that happening at a bigger school. The kids really look forward to it. They like that they know people across the grades. You know, I see the kindergartners saying hi to their buddies in sixth grade and stuff like that. But in a bigger school, I can't imagine the chaos of being like, go for you kindergartners, especially without having the seventh and eighth grade there to help them. Or what Meredith referenced with reading buddies, that's another example of something that would be lost. So I just want to make sure that when we're thinking about opportunities that could help kids, I want to make sure that we're not cutting away opportunities as well. Thank you.
Could you state your name, please?
Ashley Bolton, South Londonderry. I haven't spoken publicly probably since I graduated high school, so I'm sorry if I misspeak or stumble over my words. I did write something, I don't plan on following it, but I'm here kind of representing Club Rock itself, and I think the smaller schools around the Manchester town that also fit into this category. I believe that all of these proposals, almost all of them, really disregard the daily routines and experiences of folks in sending towns, specifically over mountain towns like Weston and Londonderry, who all come from a wide variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. I'm a seventh generation Vermonter for context. My mom and all 6 of her siblings attended Flood Rock. Both my siblings and I, and girls I currently work and mentor with, are graduating this year, and I've seen them through K through 8. Because of those opportunities, and I've been able to follow them the whole way. Just some fun facts about Flood Rock for those who might not know. And again, I encourage you to look at your own schools, but currently we rank in the top 20% of schools in the state for last school year, out of 133 schools. In the year prior, they placed 4th. For elementary schools with low socioeconomic status students, Flood Rock ranked number 1 out of 44 schools tested for that. And of those average test scores in those students, it was 93%. Since 2018, Flood Rock's average middle school test scores have increased by 5%, and Dorset's by 2%, and MEMS has actually declined by 24%. I think I've made the point that it's obvious that the practices and routines and implementations at schools like Flood Rock are working for their students. And I think in an attempt to make education in the district more equitable, or maybe if you're looking at it through a financial lens, through these proposals of school closures, you're really jeopardizing the success of the students who already excel in their pre-existing spaces. And you're also compromising communities, jobs, businesses, and people's lives. When a community loses its school, it also loses its people. People will move, which means you don't have people to staff grocery stores, banks, no volunteer fire and rescue squad members. Rural communities like Londonderry, Weston, Danby, and Sunderland rely on K-8 schools in their town. They rely on them because they travel far. We have volunteer rescue squads and fire, like I mentioned. These schools provide access and opportunities to families and children who may not otherwise be exposed to them. Sorry, I'm just kind of jumping around here to not repeat what others have said, and again, I echo what Cliff and Meredith said as well. And then, most importantly, I think the core message of everything that people are saying, thinking, is that these changes are not what I truly believe are in the best interest of our students, our families, and our communities. You can't make a system equitable by taking away the resources of students who are already succeeding in their environments. Vermont education is sought after by out-of-state families because it's small, it's intimate, it's unique, and it produces results. We are one of the most educated states in the country. We've seen what happens when people try to urbanize rural towns with systems and practices that don't work for communities like ours. Like almost everyone else in our school communities, I urge you to revisit, reconsider, and completely rewrite some of these provided proposals, as we were speaking about earlier, for making a brand new middle school building or even elementary school. And that's pretty much it. And I think I also just, one thing I did think of is Manchester Elementary School right now is already really hard to staff. It has a really high teacher turnover rate, and so my concern with building a new school for any of these grades is what staffing would look like, and I don't think it's there.
Thank you. Ashley, can I just say, if you would like to forward that on to us, feel free to email it to us.
Absolutely, thank you.
Any further public comment at this time?
I was really hoping that everyone else would cover. Thanks, because I also don't publicly speak. I haven't gone to any of these schools. My kid is only 2. I'm pretty old. But my friend forwarded me the report from the meeting on March 17th. And I don't want to be anti-anything, but in terms of the H1 proposal, I noticed on that sheet, at least it said pass for transportation falls within 60 minutes, and today reported 65 minutes. So I was wondering if maybe that could be updated. I second her concerns for Floodbrook transportation for the mountain towns for after-school programs if H1 is implemented. And also noted the max capacity was listed at 450 and H1 put it at 462. So in terms of concerns for a younger population, and like if we're just not being very optimistic on that, and if H1 provides room for growth, we're putting them to over capacity when we already have concerns about younger population. And echoing Ashley's concerns for the community population kind of relies on schools and mountain towns. And we don't really want people to move out of places like Londonderry. And before I pass out, I think that's it. Oh, and for like, if we do end up with like kind of a mega school, like considering this day and age, like concerns for safety in a larger school, like that would also pose a bigger problem that might be more beneficial, not consolidate. I think that's it. Okay.
Thank you. Could you share your name, please, for the record?
Elizabeth Londonderry.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for being brave.
Email's better.
You can email anytime. Any further public comment on, any comment online?
Yes, there's one.
I can't read the name.
Caitlin Campbell.
Kate, go ahead, Kate.
Hello. There's been a lot of talk when we talk about the regional areas of school choice being in danger. And we've been doing a lot of talk about how we're building schools for the future. And I guess I have more of a question than a comment, but I'd like to know if the possibility of adding students to our schools has been considered, if school choice is endangered in especially elementary groups. Will we have room for these kids if we have to have them being added as school choice changes in our planning? Should that be a consideration of planning for new elementary school and elementary and middle school buildings?
Brenda, do you want to, or otherwise I can comment it.
Yeah, it's all included in the considerations.
Did you hear that, Caitlin?
Okay.
I'll just reiterate.
Yes,
Everything's-
thank you.
We've kind of been following it and considering it, and you're not seeing reports on it because we just don't know the future, but it is in our purview.
Because I just didn't want us to hedge us into a box and not be able to add students if we have to.
Right.
Yeah, neither do we.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. I'm going to conclude public comment now, so we can move
I would
forward.
like to make one last public comment, if I may.
Sure.
I just want to thank everyone for their comments, because you realize from the complexity that we have a hybrid organization here. We're trying to bridge things that aren't normally bridged. And so we're trying to create high-quality public schools that work closely with high-quality independent schools. And you observed how it's been a positive thing for your kids, and we saw that young woman from Floodbrook give an incredibly powerful and well conceived speech about why she feels very comfortable in the current environment. I just want everyone to realize that we are working hard together, and it's not public schools aren't just a necessary evil or a weak link. They actually are an asset to offer educational opportunities and, more important, access to everyone. You have people from all walks of life coming in here and having access and getting and growing. And yes, some people maybe do fall through the cracks, but we work hard at that. And you have the Success Program, and then you've got all these programs at Long Trail and at BBA that build on that. So we're trying to figure out a way to continue to appreciate this hybrid that is unwieldy sometimes, but it seems to be working. So I appreciate all the comments, and I appreciate your all understanding that we get it, but it's not easy, and it's not going to be easy. That's all.
Thank you, David.
I have one last more question. Leanne, Dorset, Vermont, grew up in the area, MEMS, Burton. Why are we not considering, if we're going to consolidate schools, why are we not considering using our existing infrastructure? Building costs are going up, tariffs are going to affect costs of building. Why aren't we trying to put some money into our current schools if we're going to consolidate? What are we going to do with Dorset School if we close this school and build another one? What are you going to do with the Phillipsburg campus? You know, there's a lot of space here that
Right.
can be utilized. Infrastructure, like electricity and water and everything already existing. That's big expenses.
I'm going to give you a really quick answer, and then I'm going to say that we've discussed some of that, and that we have some of those in the packets from the past. But I think the really quick answer is, if we were to, there's two quick answers. One, we've been looking at the current state of our buildings right now, and there is some indication that it may be fiscally irresponsible to continue to use them because they will need so much work in the near to long term. So this is, some of this has come about because of that consideration. And again, we have more information for that on the website, and I can help direct you to it after the meeting. And the second part that I was going to mention is what would happen with these buildings currently without anything changing from the legislature. As we merged during the Act 46 process, we wrote articles of agreement that said for each of the towns that owned a school, Dorset, Sunderland, Courier, if any of those schools do close while we're in this configuration, that school can go back to the district. Essentially, they have first opportunity to buy it for $1, which is what we bought it from the towns from in the first place. So that would be up to the towns how they want to handle that. I'm saying that with a caveat of, as we currently operate with the TNG, I do not know, and maybe somebody here does, but I don't know where the merger agreements or articles of agreement lie if the state merges us into bigger districts. But currently, if we were to make that change while we are a Taconic and Green District, the towns would have the first opportunity to take the buildings back. Do you want to add to that, John?
Well, just that, I think A1 is of all the options is the lower impact options. Of thinking like mild, medium, and spicy. That's the using the current infrastructure and status quo. Remember that fourth option is using our current infrastructure. So I think there's like what we have right now on the table is a range of options of varying degrees of construction, and so consider that, and don't forget the status quo is using. If we don't like it as voters, then we're going to use our infrastructure, or the state's going to tell us how we want to. In the House bill, I will read part of the legislation in the school construction bill 454, or in the school construction section. It says, further, it is the intent of this chapter to encourage the use of existing infrastructure to meet the needs of Vermont students. Joint construction projects between two or more school districts and consolidation of buildings within a district where feasible and educational appropriate are encouraged. That's the House bill passed out of the committee. I'm sure any language in here might drastically change, but that's where, vetting new options, Randy, the chair and the vice chair are going to look at what's legislatively on the table and where do these options align to what's legislatively on the table.
I'd like to move to, and again, I'd like to reiterate what David said. Thank you all very much for being patient and being here tonight and offering your words to us. But I'd like to move to action item 3, under section 6, to authorize to explore potential properties for a new school to the superintendent.
I move that we, as a board, authorize the superintendent to explore the potential properties for a new school. One of the things that a lot of the proposals call for is, in fact, finding property in which to build, if that becomes one of the options that we want to entertain. So in order to get that done, somebody's got to go and explore properties that might be used. So
Do we have a second for
I'll
that?
second it.
Thank you, Chelsea. Any further discussion on that? Great. All those in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstained? No, thank you. Bond information. Do we want to go?
Yeah, it's just for distribution, just to
Okay.
clarify for folks.
Great.
You know, that there's really 2 concurrent processes potentially happening, and I wanted you to be able to understand as a board that, you know, I guess, quickly,
Yeah.
if ultimately the end game is to have significant renovation or new construction, a fully fleshed out plan would be developed. There'd be all kinds of community engagement. We'd be informing people, and ultimately that project would go to the voters for a bond vote. That is independent of if the board through this process decides that their recommendation is potentially to close schools, then we go through the process required through the Articles of Agreement to host community sessions, hold a vote, and then the board, 75% of the vote from the board. So both of those things have to happen. And I just wanted, you know, I think it can be a little bit confusing about what's actually going on. And so there would be parallel processes, you know, over roughly the next year of movement on this as we go. So, so we can close schools independent of the bond. And I know it was raised at the last meeting, the idea of contingencies, and I think, you know, as the board continues discussions, I'll continue to think about, you know, what ultimately, how do we provide real stability to the system and protect and enhance opportunities for our kids. So, you know, as things are happening, I'll continue to be thinking about that as we move forward.
Great,
Okay.
thank you, Randy. The next item is monthly update from the superintendent. It's in our packets. Since I know we've all read it, is there anything you want to draw attention to, Randy?
There's just really great stuff happening in our buildings. If you have the opportunity to look at the links, there's just really great stuff. It's exciting. It's really cool to see some of the projects happening and the involvement of kids and the opportunities that they're having, and just super fun stuff, which is great. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't need to, you know, do this sort of the way we always do. I did include class size information in here for you because that had come up a couple of meetings ago, and so I wanted to include that for your information. I think it's relevant, particularly what we're talking tonight, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions?
You know where to find me if you have any.
I'd like to give a shout out to Bob Niles. He's been doing such a great job, I think.
Absolutely.
Reporting out on all of the things that are happening and helping us to fully understand, since we cannot be in those classrooms and at the schools. So thank you, Bob.
I
Wherever you
did.
may be.
Oh,
It's online.
Okay.
I did also include this information for you around this outage stuff that's been just a nightmare for the last 3 months. I wanted you to know I have been incredibly frustrated with the internet provider, with the device people, the firewall. I mean, this is not my thing. But ultimately, my last frustration was I need something to give the board. You know, this has been going on since January. It affects everything. It's deeply frustrating to everybody. Everybody. And I wanted you to be aware that we're really doing everything we can, and considering a whole host of options, we don't have many options as far as using a different provider, and the cost would be exponential with a tremendous amount of load, so we're trying to solve this. But I really wanted you to be aware. I wanted you to see from them what they provided, so I'm staying on top of it, okay?
Thank you.
Ben, did you have something else?
Yeah.
Oh, just in regards to the class size information, I do think that if the House proposed legislation moves forward, it's just worth having these numbers refreshed for us as we look at where we're gonna, if that were to happen and I mean, I'm not being very eloquent here, but those numbers speak very clearly about the issues that we're gonna have in terms of consolidation needs.
They're relevant, and I'll continue to update you on them, you know, probably at the end of the year, so you have a sense of where things are, and, yeah, I agree.
Thank you. All right, on item 7, governance process. Review and update student representation on the board. We have this again also in the board packet. I know we've kind of talked recently about it. I guess I was questioning if there's any updates we feel like we need, or if we wanted to move in any direction with this, or are we feeling good about where we're at?
We turned it over to the
Policy committee?
Policy Committee.
Great.
As an item for us to discuss, and are particularly interested in hearing from anybody who hasn't already shared their opinions with us, what issues that we as the Policy Committee should consider.
You could do it by email too.
Yeah.
Please email the policy committee.
Yes,
Sure.
please email the policy committee, or you can email me, and if you guys have recommendations on things you would like to see change, I'm happy to pass it on to the policy committee.
We meet on April 8th
Thank you.
at 11.
That is next Tuesday?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if you get it to us by Monday, that'd be great. Herb?
I would just suggest that the very last item may need more detail. The one about students get the input of middle and high schools. I don't think that's been terribly successful in the current configuration.
Right.
4.3? No, what is that?
It's the very last item.
It's in the packet.
Okay.
Monitoring policy, 4.2, board job description.
I would say it's a complex policy with lots of parts to it, and based on my understanding of the statistics, because it's complex, it's sort of difficult to say that we're actually doing all that we're supposed to be doing. In particular, the issue of trying to improve our already extensive efforts to communicate better and to receive information from the public. But the basic assessments seem to be positive. And so unless people want to direct the policy committee to consider yet another policy that needs work, we could probably move on.
Anybody feel differently? No, great. The next 3 items are distributions that are in our packet for people to review. I guess if there's any discussion or questions about any of those items, now would be the time.
I'd like to go back to financial management, the distribution. I think it's very important for the board, and we're well aware of it, but the public to know that Sue Wilburn has received the highest possible assessment from the auditors that you possibly can. She is absolutely a true gem that this district gets. And he keeps us up to date with respect to the financial implications of everything, and gives us any information that we might need to make adequate and useful decisions. And the public should know that the auditors think she's really good.
On the list, I won't call you out poet. However, let's all get better. It is important and it is helpful to us to really understand that we're doing what we want to be doing. And this is where we find glaring challenges to, where we're not fulfilling what we were promising to. Next is future agenda items. I have on here the discussion about the elementary switching with the middle school. I think that's it. Is there anything else anyone would like to add to the agenda? Herb?
As those of you who've been reading your email very recently know, my suggestion is that I should resign effective the 4th of May, because that would give you both the May meeting and, if necessary, the June meeting to act on a replacement. So unless anybody has a problem with that, I'll formally resign effective May 4th. And I really appreciate having worked with everybody. I'm going to miss you folks.
Same.
We'll miss you.
Having worked with Herb and being instructed by him in many, many different ways, I would just like to say that it's been an absolute joy and pleasure for me to get to know you better, to having worked with you, having disagreed with you and been proven wrong too many times, but more in particular, the incredible amount of energy that you expended, little known to the public, but I know a little bit more, and so does David Chandler, how much you care, how much you really value your service to our communities and also to all of our students. You always have sought the very best from all of us and been absolutely a complete and honest in the true words of what this means, a gentleman. Thank you.
True, yes.
Thank you.
Can we invite you to the May 6th meeting?
Pardon?
Can we have you join us at the May 6th meeting? Can I invite you? Will you?
Oh.
I am inviting you. It's 9, 10.
Right.
I don't even know what day it is. Herb, will you please come to the May 6th meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
right, because if Herb resigns May 4th, this is officially his last meeting
Right.
in this capacity with our board.
You've done incredible work,
Thank you, Herb.
and
Thank you all.
it's been an honor to serve with you.
Wait, so are you coming to the May 6th
He's coming
meeting?
May 6th.
Okay. Don't say goodbye yet. All right.
We have one more public comment on the agenda. If anybody has final last words for the evening they'd like to share. Seeing none, I will request that we all fill out the board self-evaluation. It should be in the back of your packet. If not, we have an electronic form. And if you do not have it, just hit me up at the end of this meeting. I'm happy to forward it on to you. Yes. Our next meeting date is May 6th at 6:30 at the Sutherland School, also available Google Meets. And that is one final motion.
I move for adjournment.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Kidding. That concludes our meeting.
Thank you.
We don't have to vote for that, do we? I'm sorry. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. Great.